polling parents about the impact of the coronavirus on their families and communities. Wow, we finally found a reason to actually include the opinion of parents in what goes on in public education. I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we kick things off with a new poll about education and how COVID-19 has impacted K-12 children and their parents across the country. Yeah, and so this is an important story, I guess, for that very reason I said in the tease just there. We've gone years and years and years telling moms and dads that, you know, we want you to make sure your kids come to school prepared, but we're not really interested in what your attitude is towards our curriculum. You don't like the fact that we're doing drag queen read-along stories? That's tough. You don't like the fact that we're teaching your 5-year-old about transgenderism? We're not really interested in what you have to say. When it comes to the fact that we've incorporated Common Core and completely transformed your kids' curriculum down without asking your permission, not worried about that. But now that we're all on break, can't wait to find out what mom and dad thinks about everything. So nice to know that parents, at least they matter here now that schools, and that's a kind of a warning, isn't it? They pay attention to you, mom and dad, when the public schools aren't actually working anymore. Interesting.
So the polling that was done was actually Engage, is the company. It was in partnership with Morning Consult, and they took a look and asked 510 parents of school-aged children, basically, what is happening right now that COVID is out? What are your opinions about the situation? And so they got various results, and there was several questions that were quite fascinating to me. One of them was asked, thinking about the coronavirus, COVID-19, how concerned are you about your child missing this instruction time? Because as you've said in the past and every day, are they really missing any instruction time? But according to this poll, 43% of them are very concerned. 26 are kind of somewhat. And then the fact that you have 19% total that are like not that concerned or not at all concerned says a little bit more about these parents.
Well, flipping that around, 57% of American parents aren't worried about their kids learning instruction time. These are the same parents that aren't really interested, most of them aren't interested in educating the kids themselves. And now the public schools aren't educating them, and 57% don't seem terribly worried about it.
And yet, when you take a look at how prepared they feel when they're at home to teach, it's kind of different. When they're asked, how prepared do you feel to facilitate online instruction, also known as e-learning or e-days, we have 38% of parents saying, you know what, I'm very prepared for this. 33% saying they're somewhat, and then you have the 21 who are kind of like, I'm not prepared or whatever. But I think if you take a look at that, the fact that 38% of the parents feel very prepared, I want to know what the result would be if you would have asked the teachers on day one, how prepared do you feel to teach? Because a lot of them I've seen freaked out.
Yeah, I would think the number would be higher. More teachers felt unprepared to facilitate online learning. And there's that word facilitate again, right? Who's actually teaching our kids?
Good question.
We talked about how under Common Core there was a big move to replace the word teacher with facilitator, right? The argument being that we don't want teachers to actually give what they have, their wisdom, their insight, their particular creativity. We don't want that, because not every kid would get the same kind of teacher. So let's just have the teachers facilitate a pre-made curriculum.
Well, and what we were told in education school was you want to be not the sage on the stage, but be the guide on the side.
Yeah, I've heard that all the time, too. The idea that I can't stand the Barney.
You are a sage.
Don't I on the first day of class?
You are a sage.
Are
you a rosemary and thyme as well as a sage?
Parsley, baby. I'm parsley. But wasn't it true the first day of your classes you had with me, how I went on a little rant about how I don't do Barney circles?
Yes, you go on a rant every day. Right. But yes, the specific Barney circle one.
You're paying these teachers a lot of money, and I get it, they're underpaid. if they're not underpaid, if we're paying them to educate our kids, if we're paying them a lot of money to make sure our kids can read and write, then they're overpaid. If we're paying them a lot of money to be babysitters, then I guess they're underpaid. Having said that, the Barney circle, right? You're paying teachers and professors to teach kids. And so what does the new pedagogy say? The person who should talk last in the classroom, the person who should have the least to say in the classroom is the actual teacher or professor. Let a bunch of ignorant kids sit around talking about things they haven't read and that they know nothing about, and that's self-directed learning. That's much better than having somebody with, a bunch of degrees up there teaching them things. This is Reason number 8,977 why your kids go to school and come home having learned nothing. The Barney Circle. Break them up into groups of 4 and 5, where there's always one little stupid overachiever in that group of 4 or 5.
Stop
and
pointing me out.
That would have been
That
Katie,
hurts.
right? Usually they have glasses.
I used to have glasses.
Yeah, you did. So that's right. So Katie with her glasses would do all the work for the other 4 people while they all sat around talking what they did on their weekend. Right? And then we'd have those stupid cheesy reports. And then again, the little overachiever would be the only one who spoke on behalf of her group. And all 5 of them got credit for participation trophies in public schools and universities. Aren't smart things.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring.
I have all of the phrases today. Another question that was asked, how have your opinions on homeschooling changed as a result of the coronavirus? And more than 50% said, hey, I'm actually going to take a look at this being much more favorable than before. Parents, wake up call, homeschool, much better.
Well, they are, almost 40% of them feel it's easy, are having an easier time getting on the internet and doing it than the teachers do. I mean, it's not that complicated. The average reasonably educated not anymore, high school graduates, but back in our heyday, a reasonably educated high school graduate could teach kids through 6th or 7th grade, right? Could teach them how to read, could teach them math. It's not hard teaching history, especially you've got the internet at your disposal. You've got all of this great stuff on the internet. All you got to do is find it. It's so much better. The history you can get from going to actual historical sites on the internet is so much greater than using these ridiculous left-wing textbooks. Drop your Howard Zinn in the trash can, get online, and moms and dads think they can do it.
All right, moving on. Cornell University. Ever heard of it? And other universities across the nation have been warning their students to not record or share any classroom material. In April, Cornell actually issued a directive that was endorsed by the Faculty Senate and both the grad and undergrad student governments discussing academic integrity. So the Dean of Faculty, Charles Van Loan, told the College Fix it was not intended to stop students from criticizing class content and was viewpoint neutral on its face. But obviously we know why Cornell and the other universities are saying, how dare you even think of sharing or showing anyone what we're doing in these classrooms? Yeah,
that's right. I mean, and Cornell is not the only school that has privately or publicly made such statements. And the point being is that there's a lot of angst on the part of administrators and professors that they know now that what they say in the protected classroom in the insular campus, the bubble of academia, now that you're recording them and putting out there, there's nothing to stop kids from taking clips out of this. There's nothing to stop kids from sharing the links that you send so that other people can watch them. And there's a lot of faculty even talking about the fact that, you know, they won't understand the elitism here. The typical American mother and father who are literally subsidizing us, they won't understand our rhetoric. They won't understand our progressive political positions. And so therefore, people are going to take what we say and skew it. No, they're going to take what you say and pass it on. You're the ones who have skewed your classrooms.
They're actually going to, I don't know, get called on their BS. Right. Well, at Notre Dame, they actually threatened severe sanctions, as it said, severe sanctions. The associate provost for graduate and undergraduate students threatened severe sanctions against students who share learning materials, recordings of live classes, or any other depictions of in-class conduct.
Now, Notre Dame is a private school. However, they take a lot of public money. And so I would argue they're in the same category. If you're a private school that takes public money, you should be held to a public school standard when it comes to transparency, right? If you're taking money from the dollars from our taxpayers, and Notre Dame certainly is, you know, in the state of Wisconsin, I'm sure this is true of most state public schools, that what we do, our emails, as professors, anybody can do an open records research. Anybody can see what we're doing in certain aspects of what we do. But when it comes to what we say in the classrooms, suddenly there's this deep wall of silence. And the reason for that is if you got something to hide, you hide it. If you don't, you wouldn't be concerned. My lectures have been controversial on college campuses because I teach against the grain of progressivism. I don't mind if any of my lessons make it out there. Don't care about it at all. Because I have said nothing other than to challenge the sacred cow pieties of liberalism, my great fault. For that, I've been Title IX investigated multiple times. But I'm not bothered by having my stuff out there. In fact, I think if my stuff was out there alongside the typical radical left-wing professors, I think parents would be much more grateful for the sanity and balance of my classes versus what they get in almost all their other classes. So is that Dr. Pesta patting himself on the shoulder? Yeah, it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Both shoulders.
Both shoulders.
Broad
and you
shoulders.
can testify.
Testify.
You could testify.
I feel like this is like hallowed ground territory. We're just talking like, oh. Anywho, well, taking a look back at Notre Dame, they also said that if you, either put these learning materials or the recordings or whatever out there, if it is put out there for the purpose of inviting external commentary, ridicule, or embarrassment, that's where it is that you're going to get those severe sanctions. So if you put it out there and you start praising it, apparently you're going to get the pat on the back. But if you're doing it for embarrassment, which a lot of them, it would be for embarrassment, because it's embarrassing that students are actually having to sit through and listen to all this material.
These are universities. And what they're telling you is that if you do anything that is critically reflected upon, if you do anything in which we are criticized, you are punished. What message does that send your kids at college? What message does it send it? That the universities, Notre Dame, but this is true of most of them, that their position on this is if you're using what goes on in the classroom to incite critical thinking and critical reflection, or even a judgment, right, to allow the American public to judge what you're saying, then you're in trouble. If you send it around, look at how wonderfully liberal my professor is, and all other liberal professors say, this is wonderful, I'm going to incorporate this in my class, just don't criticize us, right? Don't criticize, and the implication is, the only people who are going to criticize this are goofy, ignorant, red state Republicans. That's the argument.
And when you talk about critical thinking and being critical of anything, the only thing you can do that would be right is be critical race theory, and then just go and talk about all the different lenses. But what we have here, these policies at all these various institutions, they've been there in their papers for years, but now that everything's gone online, the angst has just built up. So realistically, we've been kind of facilitating this and being okay with it up until now.
And if on most universities, things like pulling yourself up for your bootstraps, or America is a land of opportunity, saying things like that on typical college campuses are considered microaggressions right now. And if you send somebody out on this and it gets criticized, now the kids can get in trouble.
Let's take a look at our next story where, as we've been talking about, professors are having to put their material online, and now it's more accessible to others.
Here's the proof that proves what we just said.
And he's been very, very successful for decades in getting people he wants elected to public office. He has played a large role in the election over the last 10 years of leaders around the world who are very anti-immigrant. However, even before that, back to the 1980s with some of his tabloid newspapers, even since those days, he has really vilified people of color as threats to a white majority.
That was East Carolina University journalism professor Cindy Elmore, and Campus Reform was able to get that exclusive footage where she was calling Rupert Murdoch, who is, the billionaire media mogul, the one who founded News Corp. He's the parent company, Fox News, Wall Street Journal, all of that. She's saying that Rupert Murdoch is anti-immigrant and that he has vilified people of color.
This is exactly what we talked about in the previous section, right? These recorded lessons. This would ordinarily have been said in a journalism classroom.
Oh, yeah.
No one would have known. The kids who usually sign up for journalism are liberal anyway. The entire curriculum of journalism is not even really about news reporting anymore. It's about how you shade news to affect progressive causes. And so this is a completely typical thing that a journalist, without any evidence, by the way. Notice how she offers no evidence for this, but she says it anyway. And this idea that to be anti-immigrant now, which she's telling these kids, she's not giving them information. These Rupert Murdoch and thereby association, Fox News and all of his subsidiary are anti-immigrant. Why? Because you want legal immigration. I don't know anybody in this country that I know on the American right who wants to shut the borders down for legal immigration. This is illegal immigration. So if you oppose illegal immigration, which is the law of the land, right? You can't just walk in here, the federal law still says. then now you're anti-immigrant. And he demeans people of color. And that's it. Notice how journalism here, what does that have to do with anything, right? So other than you're teaching journalists, don't be like Fox News, basically. That's the whole point.
Well, she also said that Rupert Murdoch, used media properties to help get people elected, to interfere in the political process, to help get people elected who can then help his businesses, and often he doesn't even have to ask them to do this. It's kind of an unspoken thing for people that he helps.
Was there any mention that CNN and MSNBC are conspiring to keep the Tara Reade situation away from the public? Does that not, for their own ends? CNN and MSNBC and pretty much all the mainstream media outlets have largely ignored the Joe Biden Tara Reade situation. And these are journalists who are not even doing journalism because it might never negatively impact the Democrat candidate for presidency. That's not mentioned. That's serious and demonstrable. But that doesn't kind of show up, does it?
But she explained to Campus Reform why she's focusing on Murdoch.
Sure
she said, one of the main reasons is because Rupert Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, and until last year, the owner of a massive, massive media empire, has controlled media around the world for decades and decades and has personally directed many news decisions at many of those outlets. It gets better. It isn't just me saying this. His personal involvement is very well established.
Right, and that's not true of everybody. You think Zucker? You think the clowns at CNN? I mean, look, if you want to call out Rupert Murdoch for manipulating news for his own purposes, is that not true of all the mainstream sites as well?
Not according to her. She said there has never been anyone like him who exercised the kind of power he does in the world of global media.
Well, there
simply isn't a parallel figure overseeing CNN or MSNBC. Although those outlets have CEOs, they would be controlled by boards of directors who represent the interest of many shareholders rather than a single majority owner. Fact check.
Fact check.
Fox News has a board of directors.
Yes, they do.
And shareholders.
Yes, they do. The problem with Fox News is they're successful. Look, if you gave me Fox News versus the rest of the media, I'd take the rest of the media. Fox News is successful because there's so few sites like it.
It's time for some real education. Oh, the English playwrights and poets. We have yet another gentleman by the name of Christopher Marlowe, who apparently was actually nicknamed Kit Marlowe. He is of the Elizabethan era and is sometimes credited as Shakespeare's co-writer. People call him the master of blank verse, and he likely would have created many more than the 6 years' worth of plays had he not been stabbed to death in 1593 at the age of 29. But lucky for all of us, he was able to write Dr. Faustus within that time period.
Yeah, Marlowe is, the idea that Marlowe wrote Shakespeare's plays has largely been debunked. Nobody believes that seriously anymore, and I get why they think it. Marlowe was dead by 1590. Shakespeare's career really took off 1591, 1592, somewhere in there. But what Marlowe did for Shakespeare was two things. Number one, he normalized blank verse, iambic pentameter, which is the poetic verse in which Shakespeare writes, called blank verse. He was the first one to really convincingly use that, and Shakespeare seized upon it. He also wrote comedies, tragedies, and history plays primarily, and Shakespeare clearly learned from that how to write his history plays in particular. Marlowe is a really fascinating figure, and you mentioned his greatest work, Dr. Faustus. Faustus was it's an old German story, a German parable about a man so wise, so smart, such a prodigy, that he had mastered all earthly learning at a very young age, Faustus. He knew everything about religion and theology. He knew all about law. He knew all about medicine. And so he was so brilliant and so young that he decided he needed more knowledge. And so what he did was he turned to the occult, Faustus. And what he did was summon a demon, Mephistopheles, from hell and sign a contract with the devil. 24 years of earthly power for Faustus to do whatever he wants, wherever he wants, to be invisible, to be able to travel over great spaces of time, to have incredible power. After 24 years, the soul would be forfeited to the devil. Now, I got to tell you, I actually, in graduate school, I directed this play, and I played the role of Mephistopheles. The play was actually set in a Gothic Baptist church, an old Baptist church with a lot of Gothic wood in it. And the Baptist preacher, Ernie Elder was his name. He was 6 foot 8 feet tall. He played the devil In his own church. It was a great production, and it was fascinating to be able to play the devil Mephistopheles. I was the one who Faustus summoned. And this is a great passage from that play. There's a conversation between Mephistopheles and Faustus the first time Faustus summons the devil. And Mephistopheles, he's very world-weary, right? He's been suffering in hell long before human beings were even created by God. So he's very jaded. And he's won a lot of souls for the devil. But Faustus, it's almost as if Mephistopheles sort of feels sorry for him. And at one point, Faustus says to him, "Do you honestly think I'm afraid of mythological stories, fairy tales like heaven and hell?" I mean, and Mephistopheles hits him with this passage. He says, "Why, this is hell, Faustus, nor am I out of it. Thinkest thou that I, who saw the face of God, and tasted the eternal joys of heaven, am not tormented with 10,000 hells and being deprived of everlasting bliss?" Faustus had, and leave the quote up, Mike. Faustus has just asked him, "Do you really believe, Mephistopheles? Come on, you're a wise devil. Do you really believe there's such a place called hell?" And the devil says, in a moment of great honesty, "Do you not realize this is hell, Faustus? Because I'm walking here, talking to you, speaking to you, do you think I'm really out of hell? Thinkest thou that I, who saw the face of God, do you actually think that I, who saw the face of my Creator and tasted the eternal joys of heaven, do you think I am not tormented with 10,000 hells in being deprived of everlasting bliss? Do you not know how I suffer?" You think Faustus would learn that lesson? You think that warning? The devil only warns you once. And when Faustus laughs in his face, the devil says, "It's on."
And that's going to do it for this Monday. As always, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And if you have a question for our Friday Q&A, visit freedomproject.com/askduke to send it our way. Otherwise, send us a message on social media. We want to know what question has been burning in your mind. But we are going to wrap things up with the fun fact of the day. And since we talked about a doctor, did you know that Dr. Pepper is the oldest major soft drink in America? In 1885, pharmacist Charles Alderton was a pharmacist at Morrison's Old Corner Drugstore in Waco, Texas. It was on December 1st when he got the patent for his creation, which was actually initially called Waco.
All I know is I gots to have me a Dr. Pfeffer and a corn dog every time I go down to the amusement park. My wife's from Arkansas, and so I'm used to talking that way. Dr. Pfeffer and a kern dog. And that's our show for today. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, and she's Katie. Until next time, stay Dr. Pfeffered, my friends.